Good. So, welcome back. This afternoon we have a short meeting, but the purpose of it really is for us to meditate together, but also to prepare for the liturgy this evening and for the liturgies in the coming days. And just to reflect together on what liturgy means. I think for many people today, the idea of going to church, of having a formal religious expression or structure is difficult. They feel it's too formal, they feel it's impersonal, or it doesn't engage them or their experience or express what they're feeling, and that's understandable. And we don't have to go to church to be saved. However, I think we may benefit from thinking about what liturgy means, and we may find in the form of the liturgies that we'll celebrate in the coming days something that feeds and nourishes our inner journey as well as expressing it. So I think every one of us comes to it with a different history and a different set of memories and maybe different expectations, but there is something unifying about the common form that we accept and we've inherited, and we can adapt to some degree, but we accept the basic form of the liturgy. The liturgy is really a communal event, something we do openly to witness to something. This is why people who've been living together for many years or some years may decide to get married, because that is a liturgy. It's a liturgical or public expression of something that has become real in their love for each other and their desire to express that, to commit themselves to each other and with other people around to support and celebrate and be with them. So liturgy is a communal event. It's a response to the sacred and to our ongoing relationship with the sacred. And the sacred, like everything else, has both an interior meaning or realm and an external expression, something visible and tangible. And clearly, the more integrated these two dimensions are, if we have really some experience, some spiritual experience that we want to express, that we want to share through these forms, through these symbols, that's going to be very much more enriching than if we come to it just as a sort of rather more empty, superficial, social activity. Even the Quakers, who are very reluctant to, in a way, reject religious forms and sacraments, but even the Quakers, in their very simple time of worship and silence, have a formula. They have a form that they follow. So they have a liturgy as well. So there are complicated liturgies, there are more domesticated liturgies, and there are, big public liturgies which get televised and, very grand events with big choirs and so on. So there are many forms of liturgy, and the ones that we'll be celebrating this Easter will be communal, both in the sense of expressing what we have experienced and reflected on and shared during the retreat, and will continue to do so. The little community that we formed through meditation these days. But now we'll be merging with the local community, the the islanders, who have over many generations worshipped in the church that they will be going to this evening, and will be their guests and their fellow worshippers. So the liturgy will reflect their customs and their language and their style of worshipping, which I think we can find very attractive and sincere. And they're welcoming us with our particular personalities and brands and so on. The heart of any liturgy really is a combination of words, of music, and of ritual, and ideally also of silence. In a liturgy celebrated by a group of Christians, we understand that it is Christ who is the minister, Christ who is the chief celebrant, the priest. There is only one priest, and in Christian understanding, the clergy who may be around, or the altar servers, or the parish assistants, and the general congregation, all of these share in that priesthood of Christ. So we are all priests in a sense, or priests by sharing in the great mystical priesthood of Jesus, the one who offered himself, the one who sacrificed himself. So I hope we can enter into that experience of the priesthood of Christ, which of course our meditation together helps us to understand and prepare for, the unity that meditation gives to those who meditate together. On Holy Thursday, today, we will be particularly remembering the Last Supper. We've already looked at some of the passages and details of the Last Supper in the Gospel narrative. This was a ritual meal of the Jewish tradition that Jesus observed. It was his liturgy, his Jewish liturgy with his friends, and he took advantage of the occasion, knowing that he was going to die, to make the gift of himself to the disciples through this ancient ritual and through this intimate sacrament, this intimate sign of the of eating and drinking. So that's been rather sort of diluted in a way by modern adaptations of the Eucharist, but it's the ingesting, the eating of the bread, the drinking of the wine, if we do that, which is the intimate gathering of the people into union with Christ in his gift of self. And that's what we will be doing this evening. In particular, we will be remembering a very crucial element of that liturgy, which is the washing of the feet. Jean Vanier calls this the lost sacrament of Christianity, because Jesus very specifically says in the Gospel, which describes the way he took off his outer garment and washed the feet of the disciples before the meal, to the shock and consternation of the disciples, especially St. Peter, who actually refused to have his feet washed by the Lord. And Jesus insisted very strongly. And then at the end of which he says, you must do this to each other, for each other, as I have done it for you. It's a very explicit instruction to repeat this sacrament, this gesture of mutual service and of concern and of tenderness for each other. Now, normally this again has been formalized so that it's usually it's the priest, the celebrant, who washes the feet of 11 or 12 people chosen from the parish, because it's impractical to do it any other way. And yet there's something very powerful in the way that Jean Vanier enacts this lost sacrament, as he calls it, and I've been with him several times when he's done this. And this is what we will try to do this evening. We'll divide into, I think, 4 or 5 small groups. 4, is it? Anyway, 4 or 5 small groups in a circle. We'll have to
change the chairs
around, and we'll get there a little bit earlier to do that. And there'll be a bowl of water and a couple of towels. Try to make the water warm, but don't complain if it's not. And after the homily, we'll gather in these circles. Everyone is invited to join in. Nobody is forced to join in. So usually the children have a bit more fun than their parents or grandparents. But so all of us, I think, should be able to do this without embarrassment. And we sit around in a circle, take off our shoes and socks, and then one person will wash the feet of the person next to them, both feet, in the bowl of water, and then dry their feet. You don't have to scrub their feet, just it is a symbolic thing actually, but it's a powerful symbol. So just sort of wash their feet in the, and I think tenderness is the key word to this. If you do reflexology, don't spend too long on it. And then you dry their feet, and then the person whose feet you've washed will put their hands on your head and bless you in any way they wish, in silence or with a short prayer as thanks. And then that person whose feet you have washed, will turn to the person next to them and do the same, wash their feet, who will then bless them in the same way. So in that way it goes around the group. And during that time we'll probably be singing a chant. So that's a way in which we physically remember and enact that historical moment, which is both in time and out of time. We are not just remembering it, therefore, as a past event, but we are bringing the past into the present, or we are discovering the presence of the past in our present. And this is what we call liturgical time. Although we will be operating within a fixed amount of chronological time, we won't be there for 3 weeks, but within that liturgical space, we will be in liturgical time. We're opening ourselves to a tradition that flows through time and touches us in the present. So this is something we can think about at the time. We just do it and allow ourselves to be blessed by it. Then the Mass continues in the same way. Then after the Mass, we have the stripping of the altar in preparation for Good Friday. So we take away the normal stuff that we have around it, make the altar and the space as bare, simple as possible. And then we take the Blessed Sacrament out, we were talking about this earlier today, we take the Blessed Sacrament out of the tabernacle, we have some period of time for worship, for adoration, and then we will conclude the Holy Thursday liturgy, and then those who wish to can stay, we'll stay for meditation. We'll have a 20-minute meditation at the end of the liturgy. Okay? And anyone who has to leave can leave quietly. And I suggest that when we finish the meditation, we'll time it with a bell as usual, that we leave as silently as possible and try to begin a new quality of silence and awareness and attentiveness during the next couple of days. Friday, tomorrow, we will have the Stations of the Cross in the church, which Pauline will lead. And this, for those of you who haven't done this before, is a traditional service and prayer by which we move around the church, and the Stations of the Cross are on the wall, and each one represents a particular moment from the narrative of the passion and death of Jesus. His trial, for example, and his carrying the cross to Golgotha, and his crucifixion. And at each of these moments we zoom in, as it were, we pay attention to the actual event or the actual experience. And I think this opens us up to a sense of empathy with the human suffering of Jesus, and we could be open to the way in which our own suffering, our own cross that we all carry, is united with his. This is something, again, it has a formal structure, but each of us can pour ourselves into it personally as much as we wish in our own way. So that's the Stations of the Cross at 9:30, and then at 3 o'clock, which is the traditional time at which Jesus died on the cross. He was traditionally put on the cross at 12, and hung on the cross for 3 hours, and then died, gave up his spirit, as it says, at 3 o'clock. So we begin the liturgy of the Passion at 3 o'clock. It's not a Mass. Mass is not celebrated on Good Friday anywhere. So that all our attention can go into a deep contemplation of the meaning of the cross. And the elements of the liturgy of the Passion tomorrow afternoon begin with the reading of the Passion, again in a sort of dramatized form, so that we can feel it coming alive again today with us and engaging us. And I hope the conversations we've had and the reflections we've had on certain passages will help us to enter into the sort of the lectio, the reading of the Passion that we will do tomorrow. And then after that there are some prayers, universal prayers, vocal prayers, by which we recall the universal significance of the cross for all peoples. It's a kind of universality of the cross. And then there's a very powerful ritual, which is the veneration of the cross. Again, this is obviously a voluntary gesture that you come forward with, in line with everybody else, come towards a large cross which will be at the foot of the altar, being held by a couple of the servers, and you bow or genuflect before the cross and venerate the cross, usually by a kiss or a touch, or however you prefer, but usually it's a kiss. And in a way it's a very silent gesture, a very personal gesture. It's one both of worship and of veneration, but also of sort of identification with everything that the symbol of the cross has come to mean for you. And then we end shortly after that with a communion. Strictly speaking, I don't think communion is necessary on Good Friday, but it's the custom, so we follow the custom. So we receive communion, it's not a mass, but we have communion, and then we will take a short time to after communion, and then we finish the liturgy in a simple way. And then, for those who would like, we'll take a walk. We'll just go straight from the church, and maybe drive up, I suppose, to the foot of the hill where the cross here on Bere Island is, and we'll walk up silently to the cross, to the Bere Island cross. And then the rest of the day, the rest of Friday, is a silent time for silence.
And meditate here at 6.
And we meditate here, thank you, yeah. We meditate here tomorrow at 6 o'clock. So I think that gives us time from the church, walk up to the cross, if you wish, and then come back here for meditation at 6 o'clock. And then on Saturday, we're in limbo. We're hanging in empty space. In terms of the story, of the episodes that we're following, Jesus is buried, the disciples are scattered, and the women are the only ones who are visible at this time of his disciples, and we're waiting. In the tradition of the church, Jesus has descended into hell. He's gone into the dark corners and to meet the dark gods and to penetrate, you might say, into the deepest and darkest corners of the psyche, and to free us from the fears and the memories, the ancestral memories, and our own personal anxieties that lurk in these dark places of the psyche. And the meaning of this Holy Saturday, this descent into the dark places of humanity and of history and of evolution, we might even say, is that we are being set free, so that wherever we go, whatever happens to us in our lives, whatever dark places we find ourselves in, we will find him. That he has gone before us into these dark places of isolation, or of loss, or of death, or of loneliness, or of suffering. We are not alone in these frightening places. So we sort of hang around on Saturday, waiting, allowing Jesus to do this work, and then we gather on Saturday evening for the liturgy of the vigil, and this is begins at 9 o'clock in the church, It begins with the lighting of a fire. We're like cavemen and cave women, lighting a fire in the dark, gathering around it, and beginning to tell a story. It's a sort of a very primitive symbol, but it's illuminated by a sort of a recapitulation of history. In the readings and the first part of the Easter liturgy, of the Easter vigil liturgy, we recount the story of the world, basically, from creation up to the moment of Christ, and then we have the reading of the Gospel of the resurrection, the symbolism of light, which we've already initiated by the fire, and also lighting our candles, our individual candles within the darkened church. So that we're really dealing with symbols rather than concepts here, but the symbols speak for themselves. And then, as I say, we have the Gospel, we sing the great A word, which we haven't been allowed to say during Lent. I can't say it now, so if you don't know it, you'll have to wait till Saturday night to hear it. And then we will then have a very special moment for our community as Mike receives the sacrament of confirmation. It's a simple sacrament in which faith is confirmed, and the person receiving the sacrament opens himself to the Holy Spirit, and to the full force and energy of the Holy Spirit by giving his or her assent and consent to being touched by the Spirit. So we'll be blessed by being able to celebrate that sacrament of confirmation with Mike. So those, and then the Mass continues in the usual way after that. Except there is a moment too, which will be associated with the confirmation celebration, where the Paschal candle, which is this great symbol of the light of Christ, is plunged into the baptismal font, and it's a very ancient sort of symbol of regeneration and of fertility, and then we renew our own profession of faith in a simple formula. So those are the liturgies that we prepare for today, and we will begin, as I said, this evening at 7 o'clock in the church with the liturgy of Holy Thursday. And then on Sunday morning, we will gather at a time yet to be determined by the standing stone, the ancient stone which is in the geographical exact centre of the island. It's been there for thousands of years. Nobody quite knows why it's there, but it's there, it has been there, and it will be there long after we've gone. So it's a great symbol of, as much as we can create symbols of eternity, it's a powerful human symbol, especially on this island, of the still point, really, the still point of history, the still point of the turning world. So we'll gather there early on Sunday, Easter Sunday morning, to welcome the new born sun, the sunrise. whatever the weather, we will be there. So, are there any comments or any questions anyone would like to raise about the next few days?
The resurrection. Is that Saturday night? Or,
Yes.
is that? Sorry, I might have just blinked when you spoke about the resurrection. When does that fit into the?
When does the resurrection fit into the liturgy?
Yeah.
And you blinked when I was speaking about it. Well, you didn't actually blink because the resurrection is not described in the gospel story. It happens, but there's no description of the body of Jesus was lying in the tomb, and then he suddenly rose, or there was a flash of light and he jumped up. So there's no description of the actual moment of the resurrection. But from that moment in the story, if we have some time, maybe on Sunday mornings, we can reflect a little bit on that, because it's important really, or otherwise we have to do it on our own, is to see how the story, the telling of the story, changes after the resurrection. The early Gospels actually only had a few words to describe the resurrection, and it seems that the accounts of the resurrection appearances of Jesus were added later. But the reason for this was that the whole of the story was written with the assumption that it was all written in the knowledge and the fact and the light of the resurrection. So the resurrection appearances are how we hear about the resurrection. So how he appeared to people, or sometimes it just describes as being present. He was just there. They were going back to town and he was there in front of them. Or they were in a room, locked into a room because of fear, and there he was standing among them. So, the whole way of telling the story changes and has this new strangeness about it. Because his presence is, of course, a real presence, but it's a very different form of presence than it was before. So it gives us this feeling of slightly strange, of something being very immediate, very powerful, and yet very much out of the ordinary, very strange. So if you blink, you miss it, and we all blink. I think we do miss it, but it's celebrated throughout the Easter Vigil. I suppose you could say that if there was one moment in which it symbolizes the resurrection itself, it would be lighting the Easter candle from the fire. And then everybody lights their own candles in the church from that flame. So the light of Christ, then, that is the resurrection, begins to spread. But as individual candles get lit and lightened, then the general light in the church increases. Any other thoughts or questions?
I was just wondering about singing, and will we know what we're going to be singing? And will we be getting involved in readings or prayers?
Well, there are readers chosen, and from the islanders and from this group of retreatants, and the music will also be a combination of the islanders and the meditators. So probably tomorrow we need to do some practice. We can talk about that. Vincent has been. Vincent is he here? Vincent has been talking with the choir of the church. Good. Well, let's prepare for meditation now then.